Or I'll have to investigate that. Okay, so let's go in with the tasks here. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about career services, and then again, we'll jump into resumes, cover letters, some social media, and resume critique times. I'll be sending this to Katie, who will share it with you. So certainly take notes as you want to as we go through the presentation, but you'll have the content in the PowerPoint format afterwards. It is helpful for you to know how to reach out to us. So after this, you're like, this is great. I could use some feedback on my resume. The quickest way for you to get feedback will be to send it to resumes@css.edu. We have 3 students who review those, give feedback. They're all trained students. If after that you feel like that's great, but I need a little bit more in depth, you can reach out to me directly for the next round of feedback. And I don't think I put my email on here. It's Manders1. I'll send that out as well. So manders1@css.edu. And then our website has lots of great resources for you. So for now and in the future, you qualify for all of our services right now. All students at all sites, all delivery methods qualify to reach out to career services. And we help students develop resumes and cover letters. We help you develop a LinkedIn profile, can guide you through tips and ideas for your job search. We could do mock interviews with you. So if you're someone who has anxiety or worried about an upcoming interview, or it's been a while since you've interviewed, we provide that resource. Handshake, I want to mention, is our job and internship posting site. And so Handshake, you can get on it by going to css.joinhandshake.com. Your CSS username and email works for, or username and password works for this. It's single sign-on, so you don't need to create another username and password. The beauty of Handshake is it's a nationwide posting site. So whether you live in Duluth or in Texas or in Florida, you can put in a zip code, you can put in the kind of positions you're looking for and start your job search. It's sort of like Netflix. If you start liking jobs that look appealing to you, it'll start feeding you other jobs that it thinks you might be interested in. So a great resource for you to think about if you're looking for a job or in the future. So you qualify for all of our services now. I also want to mention that you qualify as an alum. And actually about 15% of the students that we connect with are alums of the college. For 3 years, unlimited, connect with us to help you navigate the job search or graduate school application. After 3 years, we'll still connect, but we just do 3 appointments and then we'd refer you to a community agency if you need more help than that. So keep those resources in mind now and for the future. And then let's jump into the content. So when I think about the application process, it's all about you effectively telling your story. And you do that in several different ways. The first is through your resume and cover letter. And this really is your ability to tell the written story about yourself, who you are, the facts about your education and your experiences, your skills and your qualification for the job. Usually that is used to narrow down a pool of candidates, and they bring you in for the interview, and that's your chance to verbally tell your story, give more examples. I always tell students that you want to think about whatever you're putting in your resume and cover letter in the written format, that you want to have the ability to expand on that in an interview. So if you put something in your resume, you want to be able to answer the question, tell me more about this bullet in your resume. Give me the full story of this. And then you're telling your story. And the third way is through social media. When I started in this business years ago, this wasn't part of our conversation. But the reality now is we know that employers look for candidates on social media. They Google their candidates, they're posting positions, they're networking with potential candidates. So we'll talk a lot about that. Most of the employers I talk to are using LinkedIn as their way to do that. They like LinkedIn because it's a professional site, professional version of social media. And you don't get into too much of people's personal lives, but you still can connect with them. So if you haven't created a LinkedIn account, I'd highly encourage you to do that. It's great. It doesn't, you don't have to mix and mingle personal, professional if you use LinkedIn. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. So if we think first about resume, like what is the purpose? Any good writing, you want to pause before you jump in to start writing or editing your writing and think, why am I actually doing this? So a resume really is your summary of your experiences, your education, your accomplishments, and your skills. Now, the key part of that is that it's a summary. It does not need to include everything you've ever done. In fact, many of you will say, well, how much should I include? The general rule of thumb is if you went directly from high school into college or some other training programs, it would be about your last 4 years. Generally, it's everything beyond high school, and it can be up to 10 years. Again, rule of thumb. Some of you might include information that was more than 10 years, but only if it's really relevant for the positions that you're applying to. The resume also doesn't need to include every job. If you were in a job for just 2 months and you'd rather not highlight that on a resume, you don't have to. You might need to include it on an application, like an online application process, but you don't need to include it on your resume. So, summary, you're thinking through what would be relevant for this particular position. What things might the employer want to learn about and understand that you have experiences in? And it's really persuading the employer to move you on to the next step in the process, just enough to share, yes, I have the right kind of background, skills, and experiences. Bring me in so we can talk more, and that you can check them out and they can check you out. What we hear from employers, I like to jump right in with this because we have the opportunity at conferences and through our professional organizations to ask lots of questions to employers. We can ask them, what is it that you are wanting on the resume? What are tips? What can we share with the students we're working with? So one of the first things they'll share with us is generally pretty succinct. Typically for new grads, 1 page. If you're someone who has enough experience and you're applying for a nonprofit, healthcare, or education sector, they would be willing to look at 2 pages, but no more than 2 pages. Some of you might have a master document of a resume that includes everything you've ever done in all the depth and all the details. That's fine, but when you actually submit, you want to narrow it down to about 2 pages. One for some of you, two for some of you. We also know that employers are scanning through that resume really quickly. I put 30 seconds. The last thing I heard was actually 10 to 15 seconds. So if an employer has posted position, they receive the resumes, the first flip through resumes, 10 to 15 seconds, which for some of you will be frustrating because you think, I have put hours into developing this document, and they're only spending 10 to 15 seconds. And it's true, but if they like it, then they put it in a pile and they will spend more time, or they'll highlight it on their application system. They'll go back and spend more time with it. If we know that though, we need to create a resume that is easy for someone to scan through in 10, 15, or 30 seconds. So I would highly encourage you to think about using bullets instead of a paragraph format when you write your resume. It is a sample of your resume. It's their first chance for them to see if you pay attention to details and that you took the process seriously. So you want to put time into it and have several people check and check again for typos and errors. You also want to tailor it for each and every job. So you might get to a place where you feel pretty confident with your resume, but then when you have a particular job you're applying for, I encourage you to pause, take a copy of your resume, take a copy of that job description, go through the job description and highlight all the skills and traits you can see that they're looking for in a candidate. Then go back and think, if you didn't know you, did you demonstrate that in your resume? So perhaps you read through the job description and they say 3 different times or in 3 different ways they're looking for someone who's a team player, who's really collaborative. You know you've done that, but you happen to maybe not have used that language on your resume. Go back and tweak your resume to use that particular language. Um, and if they're looking for particular technology, maybe you've been exposed to it. You might not be an expert. Be honest in terms of what your skill level is, but showcase that you've been exposed or introduced to that particular technology. You also want to be thoughtful about your email and contact information. So employers will tell us that they will call you in often for the first interview. And so they want to make sure that you have an outgoing message. They want to make sure they're getting the right person. So if you're someone who doesn't have, you've gone with like a standard outgoing message, I would change it to something that says it's you. Make sure it's professionally done. Email, again, it's all these things that are sort of the first impression, right or wrong, it's their first impression about you. Your CSS email is good for a lifetime, so you're welcome to use that. You can use a personal email, just make sure it's appropriate. Sometimes we create emails when we're 15 and we haven't changed it and it's soccer girl 23 or party girl 29. Those you wouldn't want at the top of your resume. So CSS or professional email that you use at the top. In general, I would also have you list your mailing address, but only if you're submitting it directly to an organization. If you're posting it on a massive posting site, you're using Indeed or something where you're putting your resume out there, I take your mailing address off. I would encourage you to protect your privacy. So you can have a phone and an email, but they don't need to know where you live. Different than you're applying to Essentia Health and you're submitting it, that's fine. But in other cases, be a little more cautious about that. The other thing while I'm thinking of right here is what we actually encourage you to do if you're submitting online, which will be the case for most of you, is to save your resume as a PDF and save it generally like first name, last name, resume. So I'd say Mary Anderson resume. PDF ensures that your formatting follows through, but do follow their directions. Sometimes they have specific ways they want you to save it. If they don't, then save it as a PDF. One of the things we're going to talk about is how important it is to move away from just having a list of tasks that you had in a job and instead being really skill focused. Yeah, skill focused. So instead of, let's say, you worked as a manager at Kohl's for 3 years and you want to highlight that because you're applying for a manager position. You don't need to describe some of the basic functions in your management role, but instead describe how you did it well. Use think about your communication skills, quantify when you can, adverbs when possible. What did you improve? What did you make better because of your work there? What did you receive feedback from your your supervisor, and how do you highlight that? So instead of everything you did in that position, pull it down to the skills, the accomplishments, and or what directly relates to the position that you're applying for. And we'll talk more about that. Okay, all of this, I'm going to give you my opinion. You could ask 3 other people, 5 other people, and you might get slightly different opinions on how to write the resume. And that is just the fact of the matter. People have different biases, different things they look for. So take what I'm sharing with you. If you've heard other feedback, you take it all together. It has to be your own document that you're proud of in the end. So we'll give you feedback, but it has to be your own. I would say these last 4 questions are true regardless. You have to be able to say yes to those 4. It's easy to read. Someone can scan through pretty quickly and get a sense of who you are. It has to give some detail, some descriptive bullet points. No mistakes, and honest and truthful. So regardless of, sort of slightly varying opinions, those 4 all have to be yes. Okay, so let's get into some of the details. The format. Many times when you're writing an academic paper, you're instructed to have 1-inch margins. That is generally true for a resume, but often you can go to a 1/2-inch margin on the top because you're using a name letterhead at the very top of your resume. So if you're struggling and you keep going to a second page, but you only have 2 lines on the second page, you can probably tweak. The smallest I would do at the top is a 1/2 inch. Left to right, you can go down to 0.9, sometimes 0.8. Anything beyond that gets too tight. Again, generally 1 page. For some of you, it might be a 2-page. I would encourage you for formatting to not use a wizard or a template. And there are some more, there's some newer ones that give you more flexibility, but the older ones end up being really frustrating for you. You'll do the template, it's nice, it looks pretty, and then you want to go back and make a change, maybe on a margin or on a font style, and it won't let you. It can be really restrictive. So I would just start with a standard Word document and do your own formatting. As you go through, you're probably going to have headers like education, relevant experience, supporting experience, and within there, you're going most recent to least recent, and that would be reverse chronological. I would, in terms of styling it, use some bold, some italics. You might use some underlining. Use that to guide the reader through your document, but make sure you don't do too much of it because it can get too busy. And then use it consistently, whatever you decide to do. Maybe you're always bolding your title and italicizing the employer's name. Great, just do that consistently through the whole document. We talked about bullets and how important that is. Your headers, each one of your headers might be slightly different, but you want to make sure you can use them to effectively organize the material within the resume. So for many of you, your first one will be education, your first header. Your second header might be relevant experience or healthcare experience or HIM experience. Another header might be supporting experience or other experience. For some of you, you might have a header that sounds like community involvement or leadership experience. So each of yours might be different based on your background, but I will be encouraging you to split your relevant and your supporting experiences. And the reason we do that is it allows you to bring the most relevant information to the top of your resume and still keeping the reverse chronological order. So I'll show you a couple examples of that. The mechanics, again, I can't say it enough that if it's a highly competitive position, you might know what you're trying to say and you've looked at it 17 times and you miss these typos. So the cartoon says here you want to be a professional booger, and he meant to say blogger. So these are the kind of things that you know what you want to say, but you miss those. So indeed, have our office take a look at it, have someone in your class, think about a colleague, some faculty member, have several people take a look at it. And again, each person has a different lens, so they're going to see different things as they go through. Okay, content. So your name should be the largest thing on the document. I would recommend that you consider 18, 22, 22 font size. So my daughter started school last week, and St. Scholastica started immediately. I got a cold, which seems typical. It's like all the new germs come in, and this weekend I'm like, yep, here's the fall cold. All the germs are coming in. So I have a cough drop in. I would encourage you to also think about having a format at the top of your resume that is eye-catching, so it really looks like your personalized letterhead. You're going to use that at the top of your resume, potentially a cover letter, maybe your reference sheet, maybe a thank you note in the future. So come up with something that is eye-catching. We already talked about those. Okay, the next section usually is education. I'm going to come back later and we're going to talk about summary statements and objectives. Some of you might have that, some of you might not. So if you don't have it, the next section would be education. You only need to list education for places where you received a degree. So if you did 3 courses, 4 courses at a community college, no need to list that on your resume. It really just needs to be the places that you're pursuing a degree or you received a degree. It is nice to include in there if you're maybe picking up a minor along the way, use that. If your GPA is above a 3.0, if you've been on the dean's list, include that. If you're someone who's studied abroad, gotten other certifications, all of that is helpful. And along the way, I'm going to show you some funny typos that I find. So someone had dispensed medication and passed out. I think they meant dispensed and passed out medication. Hobbies, enjoy cooking Chinese and Italians, probably Chinese and Italian foods. So small things that entertain us in my world. So make sure, checking again. Okay, other quick tips. Oh, this we did. Okay, experience. If you use the title experience or relevant experience or even healthcare experience, you can include both paid and unpaid positions. If you ever choose to change that to work experience, that's fine, but then the assumption would be those would be paid experiences. Each of your descriptions when you're using bulleted descriptions should start with an action verb. You might get stuck on those. I include a whole list in here, and I can send you out a resource that has great action verbs. The reason you want to use a variety, maybe you get stuck on assisted, helped, and managed. That's great, but if you use that over and over again, you're not actually doing justice to the variety of skills that you have. And for a reader, it becomes redundant going through. So I would start each bullet with an action verb. Many students will ask, should I include a period at the end of my bulleted description or not? Just be consistent. You do it or don't do it, just be consistent all the way through. Think about how you can highlight, I did this a little bit earlier, your achievements. And think about the other parts of your life. Employers will tell us when we're scanning through, we want to see that their education, their qualifications, their certification are a good fit. We want to see they have work experience and some relevant experience. We're also seeing, are they a well-rounded person? So if that fits for you and you've been involved in some community involvement, some volunteerism, that's great. In general, employers are telling us they're not as interested in your hobbies. So if you had on there, hobbies are cooking and traveling and whatever, generally I would skip that and use that space for other things. Okay, as you think this through, there's three levels of developing the resume. The first is really understanding the format, the different categories, and what you're going to include. The second is working really hard on your bulleted descriptions, making them effective. And the third is making it focused for the specific position or the specific organization. So you have to get the first two done before you really can even get to the third one. So by the time you're done with 1 and 2, you have the format, you've written it up, really effective bulleted descriptions. This is the point where you're thinking to yourself, does this fit for this organization, for my field, and for the particular position I'm applying for? Then you go in, you tweak, adjust, and make sure it's focused, purposeful, compelling to the reader. Okay, pulling out, we talked about this. Pulling out the things that you think would be most relevant. Again, each one of you is in a different situation. Some of you have a lot of experience in healthcare already. Some of you maybe just have 1 job, 2 jobs, that's fine. Some of you might not have a whole lot in healthcare yet, but you've had management experience or customer service experience or technology experience. Then I would use a header like relevant experience, meaning these are the things that are relevant for this particular job. For those, you definitely will be including bullets. You might have this other category. So it's either supporting experience or community experience. Sometimes you put bulleted descriptions for those, but not always. Sometimes you're just listing the position, the title, and the dates. The professional organization that we're part of does a survey every year where they ask employers, what are the qualities above and beyond maybe what's needed for a specific field that you're looking for in candidates? And these were the 10 from last year. So as you think about writing your resume, I also encourage you to figure out ways that you can incorporate these skills. Communication is almost always number 1, 2, or 3. Teamwork, ability to make decisions, solve problems, ability to plan and organize work, process information, analyze information, technical information. So these are even just great descriptors that you can use. So you might say, analyzed what, and perhaps it's quantitative data, maybe using a technology system. Demonstrated ability to make problem or solve problems in a fast-paced environment. Effectively work in a team setting of groups of up to 3 to 6, whatever your projects are. Make sure communication somewhere in there is included. So effectively communicate with my team or with customers, or maybe you're someone who's in an education role, maybe you're working with at a call center. Always thinking about how you're highlighting your communication skills. What's interesting to me is most of these are things that an employer would not want to teach you. So they are willing to teach you their process, their systems, but they don't want to have someone come in that they have to teach how to communicate or how to be part of a team or how to prioritize your work. So they want to see that you have those proven qualities already. Here's action verbs. I'm going to send, when I send out the PowerPoint, I'll send you a sheet that has, I think it's about 100 different action verbs. So I'll send that to you as a resource. Okay, when we talk about writing really effective bulleted descriptions, I give you 2 examples here to get started. These are fine. This was someone that worked at a call center. This is very accurate, pretty short to the point. You could scan through it. But consider times when you could quantify. You don't need to do it with every single bulleted description, but when you can, as a reader, all of a sudden I get a much better idea of the scope of your work. So you didn't just answer a phone line system, you answered a 6-line phone system, and you directed those calls up to 5 departments and 20 staff members. Sometimes by putting in the results of your behavior, the results of your action is helpful. So thinking about, what did you ensure by what you did? What happened because of that? You offered solutions, you did it appropriately, you improved something. So you don't need to do every one of those for every bulleted description, but effective bullets, I can read it and get a sense of who you are and what you did in that position. Sometimes it's helpful to think about reviews you've had in the past. Where have you gotten positive feedback from a supervisor or a colleague? How can you incorporate that in? You might even say, received consistent feedback in my reviews on my ability to train in new staff using my expertise and knowledge. Put that in there. It's feedback that you received. Received feedback from colleagues on my ability to de-escalate conflict situations. So pause when you're going to write your bullets. What do you know about yourself? What feedback have you received from other people? Okay, objectives and summaries. This is so interesting to me. This would come after your name and contact information, but before your education. Here's the dilemma. Objectives we used to always use at the top, and it might be something like seeking manager of health information department at St. Luke's Hospital. The reason we don't do that as often now is because you're applying in an online system, or you've just checked a box, or you've put in a reference number of the position you're applying for. They already know what you're applying for. So in that case, I don't think you need an objective. But let's say you go to the AHIMA conference this spring, and you're bringing copies of your resume for a networking event, then you might need an objective because they want to know what you're looking for, what kind of position. So I would say it depends when and where you're going to use it, whether you use an objective statement. If you do it, you want it to be pretty direct, not so narrow focused that it's only if like at a networking event, you want it to be broad enough you could hand it out to several people, but not too fluffy. Those are the ones that employers will tell us they'll skip over. So if your objective is seeking progressive organization where I can utilize my strong communication skills and teamwork, they'll say, yeah, everybody says that. They'll skip over it. If you can be more specific, like seeking dynamic work environment where I can use my 7 years supervisory experience and background in technology, maybe even more specific than that, to make immediate contributions to the department, something like that where you can quantify and be more specific. So what you want to think about if you write it, and if you think most people could write the same thing that you just wrote, it's too vague. If you can be more specific, you're like, nope, this is unique to me, then that's all right. Summary statements tend to be a little bit longer. Objective is really a 1-line description. Summary might even be 3 or 4 bulleted points that you want to highlight your skills for that particular position. The students I work with that are coming right from undergrad and they're in the HIM program on campus here, often they don't have enough information to summarize yet. Some of you do. You can summarize, the number of settings you've been in, different supervisory management roles, maybe technology. So you have more to summarize. So some of you, I think you could do that, but you don't have to, as long as they can see those skills and read it in the descriptions below. Okay, other things you might include. Yes, if you've been involved, extracurricular, you've volunteered, theater, music, travel, some of those, you don't all have to have all of those, but some of those might apply to you. I think if you always put on the lens of the employer, what would that information help them to know about you? So for example, I just had an employer say, anytime I see someone who's been involved in theater or music, I know they have a confidence about them in interacting with other people. I thought, well, that's really interesting. I haven't heard that before. And another employer who said, anytime I've seen someone under their supporting experience show me that they've worked on a farm in their life, they immediately go to the top of my resume stack. I was like, really? Why? And they said, people who've worked on a farm know how to work really, really hard, and it tells me something about their work ethic. So interesting, people sometimes like, well, that's not really relevant. It might be. The hard part with that is you don't know every employer what they like and what they don't like. So I think you think about you. What's been important in your life that has taught you lessons, skills, and experience that supplement or complement your other work experiences. You might also include some special skills like language skills, computer skills for sure in your field, certification. Maybe you've had some special training or relevant workshops. In your field, many of you will have a whole separate section called computer skills, technology skills, where you will pull out any electronic medical record systems you've used, programming that you know, databases that you know. So you can embed that in your descriptions, but if it is a big part of the job you're applying for, I would pull it out and have its own separate section. Whenever you're highlighting skills, the one caveat to that I would say is make sure that you're being realistic about your skill level. So if you put on there that you're fluent in Spanish, make sure you're ready to walk into an interview where someone might conduct the interview in Spanish. If you can't do that, don't say fluent, say conversational or introduction or basic Spanish language skills. So it's okay to put it on there, just be honest about the skill level. References would be a separate standalone document. Sometimes people in the past have put that at the bottom of their resume, or at the bottom of their resume, they'd have a line that would be references available upon request. Employers now tell us no need to put that on your resume. They know when requested that you will provide the references. So you don't need to list that on the bottom of the resume. And what I would suggest you do is whatever you come up with for the top of your resume, that becomes the letterhead at the top of your references as well. And then usually 3 to 5 people. If you're applying for a job, they usually want people that they can call or send a form to. If you're applying to graduate programs, they often want a reference letter. In either of those situations, you want to first ask the person, would you be willing to be a reference for me? And then if it's a reference letter for a graduate program, just make sure you give lots of lead time for the people doing that. I would say at least a month lead time. It just takes time to craft that, especially if you're asking faculty. They're asked a lot to write letters of recommendation, so make sure you leave plenty of time for that. I know this is a little blurry, but I wanted to at least show you what a reference document could look like. So again, you have your contact information up at the top. Generally what you'd want is the name of the person, their title, where they work. Ask them what contact information they would prefer. Usually it's an email and a phone number. What's actually really helpful then is to have a quick line about their relationship to you. So your advisor, your supervisor, an internship supervisor. So let them know the context in which this person knows you. Okay. Okay, when we start to, in this, I will all be in some documents that I hand out to you or send out to you afterwards. I just picked this one as an example because I think it was helpful to see how those bulleted descriptions start to flush out. So this was someone, you know, sample town, sample position. In terms of the dates, you don't need to put like an exact date. It doesn't need to be March 15th. It can just be March. If it's been a long period of time, sometimes I even take that out. You could just have 2011 to present. Some people for the month will put like, 3 or 9 or whatever the corresponding number is. It's not wrong. I will tell you, most people have a preference for you to write it out for them so they don't have to calculate which month it was. Here, the person consistently used bullets with periods at the end. You can see they started with an action verb, so direct management, oversaw, responsible for, effectively develop would be the verb, conduct, code. A few numbers in here, not in every one, but in several of them. Responsible for system-wide project management, system selection, and installation of HIM-related computer systems. You get a sense of how to develop those bulleted descriptions. I think all of those are pretty straightforward. Abbreviations you only want to use if it's widely known in your field, and if not, spell it out the first time and then parentheses list the abbreviation. Okay. After I get through the next 2 slides, I'm going to pause and take questions. Okay, quick tips, 1 to 2 pages. If you do end up printing it out because you're going to a networking event or you're bringing it into an interview, it's nice if you can print it on resume quality paper, which you can usually buy at Target or any office store. If you do that pretty neutral colored paper, 1-inch margin, I already told you, you can fudge that a little bit. 10 font size or larger. Some of you might be younger, you still have great eyesight, you can read 8 or 9. 10 is really, for most people, a size that's appropriate. We talked about the rest of those. I think that's pretty straightforward. Okay, again, I don't expect you can read this. I just want you to get a visual of it. So you can see a name, big and bold at the top. Headers were objective, education. This person was computer science, I think. Computer science experience, and then they had other experience. Within there, they indented a little bit, they put bullets. Here's a good example of how someone highlighted technical skills. So they did relevant courses and some, in addition to some other technical expertise that they have. Another one that just, you can see an example where someone has one group of experiences pulled out because it's relevant, and then some other experiences, and then volunteer activities. What not to include, in the US at least, we don't include height, weight, picture. If you apply abroad ever, there's different standards in every country, so we'll want to look at that. We talked about no hobbies. I would generally stay away from religion and politics. It's just, they're hot topics. Legally, can they make a decision about you based on that? Absolutely not. Could it bias someone? Sure. So let's take it off and be cautious. Of course, that's different if you're applying to a religious institution, then it's fine. You want to get away from I statements. So if you put, I supervise blah, 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 just skip the I and jump right into supervise. You don't even need duties included. Skip that, again, jump right into the action verb. The last one, I mean, are you on a resume trying to put your best foot forward? For sure, but it still has to be truthful as you go through. So no lying, exaggerating. Everything you have on there, you want to make sure it could be proven. Okay. I'm going to pause there. I'm going to stop sharing, and let's see what kind of questions you might have, and or if you are someone who has done a lot of reviewing of resumes, it'd be great if you want to chat in to everyone some of the things that have been red flags for you, like make sure you don't do this, or this has been annoying to me when people do this on their resume. So go ahead and chat in a question or any tips that you might have. Or if you want to say it verbally, you're welcome to take on mute and share it verbally as well. Any questions, any tips you have from your own experiences? So someone's saying that you did check Facebook. I know, see, this is interesting. I think it's worth it to go out and Google yourself. See what comes up. Are you proud of it? Does it align with that organization? And if not, clean it up. Basically, think about, or get rid of Facebook for a while if you don't want an employer looking at it. Some employers will tell us they do it. Some will say they're not supposed to, but they do. Some will say we absolutely do not do it. But I think it's worth it to be cautious. Yeah, maybe they wouldn't find you on Facebook. Glitter paper. Yeah, isn't that funny how some of those things, it just is a turn off. I think of, what was it, Legally Blonde, that she like put perfume on all of her resumes, right? So it might be a turn off to people. What are the most consistent feedback, remarks, or comments you are receiving from hiring managers? Related to, if you're talking about resumes, let me know if that's not what you meant. On resumes, the most consistent thing that we hear, typos, if they see multiple typos, people not making it specific enough for the position. They can tell that it's a resume that someone's used and sent out to 100 different applications. Like they can tell when you've made it more specific. That people are including information that they don't care about. So, yep, it might have been really important to you that you, what's a good example of something? I had someone who worked for a long time, I think it was at Subway, but they're not doing it, they're going into social work. So we included it on there because it showed longevity, but they had so much more relevant human services work that we wanted to flush out. But sometimes it's hard for people to let it go. It's like, yeah, but that's where I got my start. That's where I learned how to work hard. And it's, yes, you can tell the employer that in an interview. So you really have to make sure that you focus on the things relevant for the job. Yeah. So you, the students denied interviews because of what's on social media. You know what else was interesting to me? I was just at a panel with employers, and they said not only have they had to do that, but sometimes they've reprimanded or had to fire people after they've been working there for something they've done on social media. They gave two examples. One was someone that had to be fired because they shared confidential information about a student. It was someone that was in an education setting. The other was someone who was just slamming their employer on social media, and someone saw it and showed it to the supervisor. It seems so obvious, but worth mentioning because they both told me that. Okay. Oh, that's a great question. So some things are in progress, and you can still put that on there, especially if you think it might be completed by the time you would be hired for the position. Just make sure you list that it's in progress. So in this case, you might have, I'm going to read how you put it here. Collaborator, collaborating on chapter for XYZ book, and maybe you just put publication pending. So somehow indicate that it's not actually published yet, but that you've been part of that. That's interesting. In the hospital you work at, if your badge is in a picture on Facebook, you get fired. A lot of places, when you get hired, they train you in on what's acceptable and not. And again, so many of you have been working that this is not brand new to you. Oh, the steady employment. Okay, so two different things. If you've had just a real small gap in employment, and it depends on your situation, I'll give you the caveat to that. I think it's okay to skip it. But on the formal application, you'd want to include every job you've ever had because it probably is required to put it there. As a student, they will assume you've had more part-time jobs and that you might have some gaps in employment. So it's interesting, when you are a college student, there's an expectation that you might have more change and transfer in there. However, once that's not the case, if you have changed a job, let's say every year for the last 7 years, that will be a red flag. And there might be good reason for it. So I would either at that summary at the top of your resume or in a cover letter address it. So you explain it so that they don't have to make up their own story about it. So in your cover letter, you might start, something like, I feel fortunate over the last 7 years, I was able to experience 7 different working environments as I followed my partner who's in the military, blah, blah, blah. So you're explaining you had to move because of someone that was in the military. Or you might say, um, I'm eager to re-enter the workplace. This would be in a cover letter. I'm eager to, after completing my degree, I'm eager to re-enter the workplace after taking a small break to complete my education and take care of my family. Then they understand why you've had a break in there. So yeah, in general, you don't want big gaps in there, and you don't want to show that you've been bouncing around. Or if you had to, you want to be ready to explain that. Okay, so you're currently pursuing a degree. You'd want to have Bachelor of Science. The College of St. Scholastica, which is a good reminder, the college, the official, has the word "the" in front of it. College of St. Scholastica, and Saint is ST period. Oh, I'm just going to write it here so you can understand that. And again, will this make or break it for an interview? No, but we might as well try to be consistent. And then you can say when you're expecting to get your degree. So Bachelor of Science, expected May 2020, August 2021, whatever that expected date is. If it changes, that's fine. It's just at the time you submitted it, it really was when you thought you're going to graduate. It doesn't mean it can't change in the future. And that is also true for other programs you've already completed. A lot of times people put the whole date they were there. So they might have Associate of Arts, 2007 to 2010. They really just care when you've completed it. So Associate of Arts, May 2010. So instead of giving all the dates you were enrolled, just when you completed the degree or when you expect. So anticipated or expected is the most common way to list that. Yeah, right. You have to keep those things updated. Do you recommend we list graduate dates? Ah, okay. This is a great question about the 10 years ago. There are times when I will have people skip some dates on their resume if we're concerned that there might be any age discrimination. So you might have to make that decision in your field and at your age. Is there any reason you might skip it? And I have had people skip. So they might say, I finished my undergrad degree 30 years ago, my first degree or my associate's degree. I might skip the date. And so if I did that, I went to Hamline University, got my degree. I might not put my graduation date at all. And then I put in my current program and put the expected date for that. So that's what I would typically do if you're concerned. I think if it's been 10, 12, 15 years, you're probably fine. It's when it's 20, 25, 30, 35, if you're concerned about age discrimination, I'd skip that date on there. Okay, these are great questions. I think I got all of them. Did I miss anybody's? Is it recommended to simply replace our habits of social media? Ah, okay, I did miss Craig. You asked, replace your habits of social media with LinkedIn. This is one of the recommendations my colleagues often make. If you're active in a job search, yes, switch your energy to LinkedIn during this time. I think you'll like LinkedIn because you can upload your resume, it tracks your professional involvement, you can start following organizations you're interested in, you can reach out and network with people who are working in fields you're considering, you can reach out and connect with St. Scholastica alums and ask about their place of employment and their job history. And then for a while, you're exactly right. Like we only have so much time in our days. If you're someone who likes social media, shift for a bit of time and put your energy into LinkedIn and put Facebook on the back burner. Once you get your job, if you're like, I'm going to keep LinkedIn, but now I'm going to shift back again and put more energy into Facebook, that's just fine. But I do think for professional presence, LinkedIn, and if you're really active on LinkedIn and I Google you, almost always that's what comes up first. Someone mentioned not using your same name on Facebook. The other thing to think about if you're Googling yourself, you might need to put in a middle initial or some way like Mary Anderson. Unfortunately for me, there's lots of Mary Andersons out there. So I usually use my middle initial, and or on a resume, I would actually give them my LinkedIn URL. So I make sure that they can find me. On LinkedIn, if you've been on there, it assigns you a really long URL. You can go and edit that. And you want to try to make it as short as possible, typically just your first name and last name. When I edited mine, again, someone had taken it. So I just used Mary Anderson Duluth. It was easy. No one else had taken that one. But it's better than all the, numbers and letters formats that they put in. Yes. I would clean up your social media, put your privacy settings on. And it's not that you don't want them to find you at all if there's positive information, but I generally say Facebook, put all the privacy settings on high, but know that they might be able to see it, and then more actively use LinkedIn. Okay. Katie, anything that you can think as we've gone through that I missed? Sometimes you think of.
The only thing, I don't think anybody asked about the RHIA. I think we've had students in the past say RHIA eligible
Yes.
or something to that effect if they want, because some of the jobs, require RHIA credentials. And so that's just a way of kind of putting it out there that I am, eligible to take the RHIA exam. And sometimes they maybe would put anticipated date of that too, or something, if they have already registered or signed up for that.
I think that's great. And I do think it's
Yep.
helpful that you just have it up front and either eligible or in progress or the date that you're going to be achieving that.
Yep.
The other thing I thought of in terms of extra information, in your field, a lot of you are involved in either SHEMA, is that right? Student Health Information Management?
Well, actually our online students aren't.
You're not, okay.
No,
So
yeah, just our traditional students, but we do have quite a few individuals in this class that are volunteering with their state, like the Minnesota Health Information Management Association. So
okay, so I would definitely put that on there. It shows commitment and involvement already in your professional field. So if that fits for you, and for many of these things, if it doesn't fit, don't feel guilty about things that I'm saying that you don't have. So I try to give you the array of things you'd include so you can pick and choose. So if that does apply to you, include it. If not, I mean, you might choose to get involved, but you might have other things that you're highlighting. Okay. Okay, I think for cover letters, well, let's see. I think I'll share my screen for cover letters, but when we get to a little bit more on social media, I'll come back and answer questions again. Oh, one more. AHIMA and MAHIMA individually. Well, I'll let Katie answer that one.
I know, Melissa, I was just looking at yours. I think if you're applying for a position at a hospital or another healthcare system, in an HIM department, I don't think you need to spell out the credentials. Generally, HIM directors and managers, coding directors and supervisors know those credentials.
Yeah.
And then, so Craig, AHIMA individually presume the state's involvement. I'm not sure. Okay, so Craig, I don't know if I'm answering your question right, but sometimes students will say, AHIMA and MAHIMA membership, they'll identify that they're members of AHIMA and then that component state association. But then if you're volunteering, identify what you have volunteered with, if it's the annual meeting or, on a marketing committee or whatever that was, I would break those out. Yep.
The other thing I'd say with that is sometimes people are involved in something and I'll say, if I were the employer and I said to you, tell me why you're part of AHIMA. If you don't have a great answer for that, don't even put it on the resume. Even if you can say, because I stay current on what's happening in the field, but I'm really more active in MAHIMA or your state organization. So not just for this, but anything, if it's like you don't have a great answer for what you're getting out of it or how you're involved, don't put it on the resume.
Yeah. And then Mary, Kevin's question. So what I'm having them do is after your meeting today with them, they need to go back and apply what you've shared and update the resume. And then we always send a copy of the resume to the PPE mentor ahead of time so they know what the student's experience has been and all that good stuff. But what he's saying here is, I don't know what would happen at my affiliation. So yeah, we haven't been on there yet, but he said, I'm not sure what to include in the objective statement. And I'm just wondering if for this the intent of this assignment, maybe just leave off an objective statement at this point and add that when you start applying afterwards.
That makes sense. How soon do they have to make their updates for you, Katie?
I have them due on end of the day this coming Sunday. So yeah, the rest of the week.
Okay. I did tell our students that are working this week that if they might get a whole bunch of HIM resumes in the next few days. And it's great because we just started classes, so they are not very busy right now. So a few of them are sort of eager for resumes to come in. So we want to send it just to resumes. They know they might be coming.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary.
So cover letters, I think I will just stay this way versus I'll send you the full PowerPoint. But I think the important thing with cover letters, if you think about resumes as your facts about you, your cover letter is you're really making a connection between the employer, the position, and you. You are convincing them that you are excited, passionate about that particular organization, that particular place. So what the feedback we get from employers on cover letters, two things. One is they're usually too generic. And so it's something that could be sent out to 15 different organizations. So that means you want to, even though some of it you might keep the same from place to place, you'd want one paragraph that you adjust that tells them why you're interested, which means you have to go out and do a little bit of research. So it might be, I'm particularly interested in a position with the Fairview system because maybe, and then you fill that in. Maybe you did your PPE there, maybe you've worked there, maybe their mission is something you appreciate and you can highlight that. Maybe it aligns really well with who you are and how you want to do your work. So make sure the reader can hear that you really want to work there. You also don't want to just reiterate what's in your resume. They can read your resume, but you might summarize it. So it might be, as you review my resume, you'll see that I have experience in management in a retail setting, technology or programming for an IT company, and now have completed I'm on my way to complete my degree. And then you highlight how you put all three of those together, and they're going to be perfect match for whatever their posting is right now, whatever position they have posted right now. So you don't say every detail, but you're showing how they all tie together and are such a great fit for that position. So you might even give a specific. So you might include something like, in my past position, my supervisor noted at every review my ability to take complex problems, break it down into small pieces, and meet deadlines. It's with this background, along with my education, that I enthusiastically apply for your position. And then you talk a little bit about why you're interested in that particular position. So you're not just describing everything you did, but maybe describing a project, maybe a highlight, something that you're proud of, something that connects directly to that organization. If you've received a referral for the position, I would definitely include that, and it might even be your opening. It's upon the recommendation of Mary Anderson and Career Services at St. Scholastica that I applied for this position. After reviewing my background and discussing my career goals, she suggested I reach out to you about this opening, and then you go on to describe why it is that you're interested in the position. The reason that's helpful is you're a two-dimensional piece of paper that comes in, but as soon as you make a connection to another person, it's like, oh, they know someone here, or I know this person, or they've been referred to this position. So that's really helpful. Cover letter is definitely just one page. I don't think ever go longer than one page. It's usually 10, 12 sentences, 3 to 4 paragraphs.
You either can use your same name letterhead up at the top, the same letterhead that you used at the top of your resume, or you can do what's called business formal, which is everything's flush left, single space. And so you would actually just have your name and address, single space at the top, a space, a date, and then their contact information. I'll be sending you example format. I personally like it when students use their same name letterhead at the top of the resume and the cover letter. Best to address it to a specific person if you can find a specific person. So dear Ms., dear Mr. You can also say dear hiring manager, dear coordinator of XYZ program. You can do to whom it may concern, but it's the least, it's sort of informal. So I like one of the other ones, either a real person or dear hiring manager. That would be my preference. The other pieces of feedback that I consistently hear is you want to make sure it's not too much about you. This would be a great experience for me because I would get this, I would learn this. You can have a little bit of that, but they're really looking at how will you contribute? How will you be a good fit? So think about shifting the focus to you, to what you could contribute to them. Most of the positions that are degree required, I think require a cover letter or recommend it. So you might have applied for some positions in the past that didn't even require or recommend. I think you're going to be finding more and more that most places do. I still find some employers say they hardly look at the cover letters. Others say I go there to make sure they really want to work for me. You don't know who's reading it, so I would take it seriously either way. Oh, the other thing I wanted to share, this is the biggest piece of feedback that happens all the time. So you think about in Duluth, if any of you are from here or you're familiar, there's two big hospital systems here, St. Luke's and Essentia. They get cover letters for the other person's hospital all the time. So someone's included and they've sent in their cover letter and says, I'm really excited to work at St. Luke's, and they've just submitted it to Essentia. So make sure, I mean, you do want to tailor it, and then you have to tailor it for every single position. So make sure you don't forget to do that. Okay, that's write in any questions you have about cover letters, and then I want to just give you a couple tips on social media. So LinkedIn, I'm going to send you out a checklist. So if you're someone who has a LinkedIn or you're starting a LinkedIn, I'm going to send out LinkedIn checklist for one, and then the advanced LinkedIn checklist. So I'll send that to all of you. Once you have your resume written, it's actually quite easy to update your profile because it's all there. You can cut and paste it, you can upload it. So start with your resume, get that down. Once you have that submitted, then I'd move on to the LinkedIn project. I think other than that, we've covered a lot of the social media already. Okay. Any last questions before we take a look at a couple? So I think I have Sarah and Elizabeth and Katura. Yes, is that how you say it? Nodding close, okay.
I was just going to quick address Stephanie's question. She said, if we have credentials, should we put these after our name in the header? And I would say yes, definitely use your credentials.
Yep. I would occasionally, I've had people shrink the size of them, but I think Elizabeth, we can use yours as an example for that because you did put your credentials behind, and it's fine the way you have it, but you might actually make your name the size it is and then your credentials just like one font size smaller. Signing off sincerely is the way I would sign off. Yep, sincerely, comma, your name. If you have an electronic signature, you can put it in there. If you're actually submitting a paper copy, you can sign it, or you can just type it. Okay. Okay, I gotta attempt to share again. Let's see, cross your fingers, everybody. Okay, we're not gonna do that. Okay. I have all kinds of things up. Don't save, get out. Okay. Don't save. Okay. Now it doesn't show sharing on mine, so it must not be sharing on yours.
No.
You know what I think it is, Katie, because we had this last time. I think it's because I do have a dual screen, even though it's not connected right now.
Yeah, that could be, Mary.
Do you even see my picture anymore?
Your picture.
Can you see me right now?
Oh, yeah. Yep,
Okay,
I can see you.
That's not even coming up on mine right now.
Great. For a second, we could see your PowerPoint, but then that went away too.
Okay, I'm going to tell you a couple other things while I'm trying to pull it in here. It's making me sign in, so I don't know why that is. Okay, cancel that. One of the other things that we were hearing from employers recently was, I think this is going to pull up. Does that pull up?
Yes,
yeah,
we see Elizabeth. Yep.
Yeah. So one of the other things employers were saying, this length, 1 to 2 pages, sometimes they're saying it doesn't matter as much now because it comes in electronic format. They're not printing it off. But then others say, yeah, but then we print it and we distribute it to a search committee. So most of them will still say 2 pages is what they recommend, 2 or less. Okay, here's Elizabeth's. So if you can all take a look through here, and I'll scroll through so you can see it. I can't do anything on my computer. Like it's frozen now. This is really great. So I can tell you the first things on here. There we go. So Elizabeth, I think this is great. You do put your credentials on there. I think it's fine as is. I think it could be a little bit smaller because then I'll focus on your name more. LinkedIn, you probably have a hyperlink here. If you're doing it in a different format, where it's a paper version, you might actually put in your LinkedIn URL. Areas of expertise, this is great because they're very concrete skills. Every one of those is concrete. If you had some things on here like, what would a good example be? Strong communication skills or teamwork, I'd probably take them out and say, prove that in your bulleted descriptions below. Okay, I'm going to scroll through and then I'm going to see. So for this part, gently and kindly, because your classmates have put themselves out there. If you want to unmute, if you look through, do you have feedback that you would say, oh, based on what Mary has said, or based on what I know, here's some pieces of feedback. So I'm going to scroll all the way through. I don't expect you to read every single bulleted description. I just want you to get a sense. Okay. Thanks in advance, Elizabeth, for being willing to do this. It's helpful to have the conversation about sort of the rules and then actually see someone live. So anybody willing to give some gentle but constructive feedback? And you can just unmute.
Hi, I was noticing in the second job description, maybe turning the paragraph into bulleted statements. Would that?
Yeah, I noted the same thing. So for all of you that submitted, I also wrote comments on all of these and I'll send them out to you for your first round of feedback. And I did the same thing. I said, I'm not sure, maybe you don't need the paragraph and the bulleted description. Yep, that's good. Another thing that I saw was, and I forgot to talk about this, is how many bullets should you have? So I think in general, 3 to 5, maximum of 6. I don't think they're going to read more than that. So it's okay to have all of them out there, but then you want to really narrow it down to the top 3 or 5 that fit.
I think Also, for some of the bullet points, like for the second job, health information manager, instead of saying responsibilities included all this, it might be better to just use action verbs
Yep.
to be more succinct.
Yep, that's good. Try to get in there. I know it's like this delicate dance between being succinct, but also being descriptive. And that's the art of writing those bulleted descriptions, and it sometimes takes several drafts to do that. I think someone else mentioned moving the education up. So this is personal preference. I almost always would put the education at the top because it's what you're currently working on that's probably making you eligible for promotions or different positions. But the more experiences you get, then sometimes people will bump it back down. So it is a personal preference of mine, but I think because it's what you're actively doing right now, I would put it back up at the top. But people go either way on that. Other things that I would say on here, yeah, here the responsibilities included. Don't need that, right? And then starting with these action verbs. Down on the degree, sorry, I hate this when people scroll up and down when I'm looking, sorry. On the education, I would say Bachelor of Science. Bachelor's degree is okay, but we generally have you write that out, Bachelor of Science. And then Health Information Management would be the official major. Is that right, Katie? You can just nod, yeah, okay. You know, it's interesting when I look through this, I would say that this might be true for you. I would say that the way you bold and use all caps for the 2 certifications on the bottom, that you might think they're more important than the degrees. And if that's true, keep it that way. And if not, you want to change that. So as a reader, I think you're drawing my attention to that. And if that's accurate, again, keep it. But if it's not, maybe you want their eye to go first to the degree that you're currently pursuing.
I also noticed under the education, the College of St. Scholastics.
Oh, good one. I didn't even see that. See, you need several sets of eyes, so Scholastica. I think you can put online. I don't know if you have to. I don't know, Katie, if you have a preference if students do that or not.
I usually see just the College of St. Scholastica.
Yeah. So you probably don't even have to indicate online.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, the only time that maybe I would think about doing that differently is maybe you're applying to teach online somewhere, so you want to show proof that you've been in an online program.
Good point, Mary. Yep.
So exceptions to everything.
Yep.
And in fact, there may be a few people who have bias against online programs and think, oh, it wasn't as good a quality. We know that's not true for online programs, but some people still have that sort of old school philosophy. Okay. Good on that one. This is great. Elizabeth, I think you did a really nice job. I'm going to send this out to you with a few more pieces of feedback to consider. Good. Okay. I'm going to do this one differently. Did it show up?
No.
No! So I'm going to have you come show me sometime, Katie, what I'm doing wrong. Because it shows up on mine, it says screen saved. I mean, screen shared. Share? That's so funny. I'm like, I got it. How about this way?
There you go. Now we see it. Sarah's.
Oh, that cracks me up. Okay, yes. This is Sarah. So if you submitted, and I'm going to let you all look and see if you have something different, other feedback too. If you submitted, we will give you feedback one of 2 ways. Sometimes if you send it as a Google Doc, our students will just write comments directly in the Google Doc for you, which is pretty slick. When we get a lot of them, or for me, I often write comments, I'll scan it and send it back to you. So I'm going to run through a few of these because there's things that I haven't shared in already. So Sarah, also, all 3 of you that submitted have really nice versions of your resumes. Sometimes I will have people make their contact information smaller because it it's sort of the least, they need to know how to contact you, but it's sort of the least interesting part of the resume. And then it makes your name stand out. So I think you could bring that down, make it a little bit smaller. I personally would simplify your objective. So I would change it to seeking a job related job, maybe a job in health information management. I might even simplify that more, field, to apply my 7 years experience. I think actually we could flip this. Seeking a job in health information management field to apply my 7 years experience and desire an organization that rewards hard work, talent, and proven record of success. You can tweak that a little bit, but I think it can be simplified a bit from what you originally had. Okay, this is another great example. So here you have your current employer, then you have your date, and then you have your title. It takes 3 lines. Instead, to save space, you might consider moving your date over to the right so it shares the line with either the position title or the organization. And then all the way through, you can have your dates consistently on the right. Sometimes people are trying to fill space and this works well, but other times you're trying to condense and make it smaller. I took out things like responsible for and instead put answer phones, maybe how many, and provided, I doubled there, provide professional customer service. I simplified your language in a few places, and in others I asked you to add more depth, like check in patients and make appointments. What, to ensure smooth running and timely appointments? Because you do that, what happens really well at that organization? Instead of maybe answering questions on benefits and claims, you could say, use my extensive knowledge of benefits to answer questions for members. Worked with multiple computer programs. Can you name them? Can you tell us more? So this is a case where you actually have all the right content, your format's working pretty well. I just want you to fine tune the bullets. So when I do this, I'm not even expecting you to change every single one, but I try to give people enough prompts that you're like, okay, I get what you means. Now I can go back and simplify the language or add a little bit more depth in here. You also had the education on the bottom. Again, I'd be more inclined to move that up above experience. I would change, the College of St. Scholastica, Duluth Min. The way you list it, just list your anticipated grad date. High school, you can all eliminate at this point. So unless there's something super relevant, I always say that, and then someone brings up an example of a time they might keep their high school in there. 99% of the time, you would eliminate your high school information. Sarah, you can move your references. This is great. You have it, you'll get the contact information, but this can be a separate standalone document. What will happen? So when you move that off and we get rid of your high school and we tweak some of the formatting, you'll easily currently be able to be on 1 page. That doesn't mean in the future it might not go to 2 pages. You add more skills, you add more experiences, but right now I think you'll be able to get yours down to 1 page. Okay. Feedback for Sarah. I know quite a bit of it's on here. Oh, here's another one where you had put like March 23rd. Like sometimes on a formal application, you have to list the exact date, but on a resume, usually it would just be March 2014 to current. Okay, good. Okay. I'm going to see if I can open one more or not. I know we're getting close to out of time here, so. I do think what's really helpful is so many of the things that we talked about, you can see it visually and you can see, the things that we talked about, why it works sometimes and why it doesn't work other times. And again, you might come back and say, Mary, I know you told us to put education on the top. I just really like the way the whole thing flows, and it's still on my first page. It's fine. Again, it's your document. As long as you can justify why it's there, I think you're just fine. I'm trying to think who the last one is here. Do you see that one?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll go through this quickly. And again, for all of you that submitted, I'll send this out so you can look at it in more detail. So the same thing, I think you can make, this is a good example. You probably have a 1-inch margin, which is just fine. I think a 1/2 inch, especially if you need the space, is going to be helpful. And I think your left-right margins can be just a little bit smaller. Some of these we talked about, so I won't say them again because it's the way we're listing our dates. Oh, I forgot. Here's a great example. You have the interpersonal, the communication. I would take those out and just make sure you prove that in your bulleted descriptions below. I think the biggest thing on yours is I would reduce the amount of information. And you might not know how to do that until you have a specific job you're applying for. So this might be your great master copy of your resume. And then you want to pull it back and say, I don't need 6 or 7 bullets for these. I need 3 to 5. So picking and choosing the things that are most relevant. There's a few of these where I was asking for you to quantify or think about, skills or what you did well. Now, here's one, I think, this is another great example. Sometimes you've proven the skill already in another bulleted description. So even though you did it in 2 different positions, you really only need to highlight it once. So if you've already set it for another position, you can delete it. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was actually a program coordinator at the same place I work now as an adjunct instructor. And my position got rolled into another coordinator's job description. So I no longer had a job, even though now I'm doing the same thing I was doing then, just fewer things. Does that make sense?
Got it. Yeah. So that's a great example. So here you were doing both and now you're just doing one component of it. You might have a bullet that just one bullet that says, I have to think how you would write this, but in addition, completed tasks as described under adjunct position. Or let's see so the medical office program coordinator, let me do that again. The program coordinator position, you did 15 to 17, is that right?
Yes, yeah, I was there for roughly 18 months.
And the one you're in right now?
I've been in for just over a year. They asked me to come back actually as adjunct. It worked out really well with my college schedule and I couldn't tell them no.
And were you doing the adjunct position before? Is that what you're saying when you were there?
No, I was there before as the program coordinator. Okay. And we didn't have enough students in the MOA program to maintain a separate coordinator, so it got rolled into the medical fields.
Okay. And
I didn't have a coordinator's position anymore, so they had to let me go, but nobody did anything wrong. It's just my job disappeared.
Right, yep. And that's a good thing to practice for an interview because these are the kind of things that an employer can ask, and if you're not expecting it, it's like, oh, how do I address that in a positive, succinct way, which you did. So this isn't in criticism.
Yeah.
What was that?
I was going to ask how I should address that in an interview because I've really always addressed it the way I just did with the employer that I used to be with. And then, of course, when I came back to the junior college, they knew what happened.
Right. Yeah, so anytime there's a situation like that where, it could be a variety of things, you want to be positive, brief, and then what you learned and how you've moved forward with it. So, I had this great position as the program coordinator, was there for 2 years. I learned this, and this. It was a great experience. Unfortunately, they ended up reducing positions at the end of fiscal year 2017, and mine was one of the positions that went away. Fortunately for me, I had such a good reputation, they asked me back to adjunct teach, which ended up working really well because I was a student at that point, and then you just move forward. So brief, positive, and then how you've moved forward from it. Yep. And any of you have had situations like that. It can be termination. It can be they eliminated your position. If any of you have gaps in your history, and we can practice it. The biggest thing is I would say practice out loud so you're not seeming like you're nervous or stumbling through it, that you're very confident in how you address it. So you can see through each one of these, I'm saying nice bullets, but just too much for each one. And then how far back do you want to go? You might feel like, no, Mary, I need this one in here because it's adding something different than the other skill sets. Or you might say, you're right, I probably don't need this at this point. I'm inclined to skip that last one. Because I think
asked about that because that was my externship for my associate's degree, which happens to be at the same facility I'm going to for my PPE.
Oh, then I would include it to show that you have experience there, but maybe just reducing the number of bullets. Yep. I think, are you at 3 pages right now?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. So,
and
but I think
reduce the bullets. I mean, when I created it, our career development coordinator at the junior college, when my position ended, she sat down with me, went over my raw resume and made some recommendations, and I followed her recommendations. But adding back in my new experience at the junior college just added a lot more to it.
Yeah. So I think, again, I wouldn't get rid of this. I'd make a copy, go through and start thinking about what are the highest level skills, what are the skills that are covered in this job, but not in this one. So you're not duplicating skills across positions.
Okay.
That's probably where your biggest work will be. And then in a few cases, maybe adding just a little bit more depth or quantifying or what you did well in those positions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're out of time, Katie, so I don't want to keep them. I'm sure everybody's ready for dinner, family, studying, work, something else, right?
Right. Well, Mary, I do see that Kevin had one question. I don't know if you can quickly answer it. He just said one interview question that caught me off guard was, what's your biggest weakness? What would be a good way to tackle this?
Yeah, so some employers have stopped asking that because they're like, no one's going to really tell us a weakness, but some of them still ask it. Usually they want to see the ability that you can be self-reflective, that you can identify that you're not perfect in every way. And they also want you to show ways that you've started to improve upon that area. So you want to think about a weakness where you actually have a concrete way of showing that you've improved. So for example, someone might say, you know, one of my biggest weaknesses is I do not like public speaking. I never have, even from a young child. It brings anxiety. I don't feel very confident in public speaking. That being said, through the course of my education, I've been required to do many presentations, both as individually and part of a group. I would say I still don't love public speaking, but I now have the skills and confidence that if I have to do it, I can do it well. Something like that. That's not quite right, but you could see how you would adjust that. Yep. The other things that sometimes people will choose, what you wouldn't want to share is a weakness that's too revealing. So, you know, I'm trying to think of something super extreme. I just received my 10th DUI, which is kind of a problem, right? So something really extreme, right? You don't want them to know that about you. So try to pick things that are really concrete, either for your field. I mean, it could also be in my field. I think my weaknesses, I haven't done a lot of supervision yet. I just haven't had that opportunity. However, in my last job, I was requested every time someone new came in, I was the person they requested to do the training. And I really enjoyed being in that position and blah, blah, blah. Here's why I did it well. So yeah, so sometimes it's a more concrete skill like that.
All right.
Good. I was just scanning. I think that's mostly it. I would practice your strengths too. It's funny, you think strengths would be easier than weaknesses, but sometimes in an interview, people are like, oh no, strengths, what am I? Yeah, so all of these you want to think of at a time. Okay.
Thanks so much, Mary. This was great.
Yeah, sorry about my technology challenges. Thanks for being patient with me. I appreciate it. It was great to connect with all of you. I'm going to send these resumes out, and then we'll look for more to come in if you want our assistance in giving you feedback.
Thanks,
Great.
Mary.
Okay, have a
All
good
right.
night.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.